Hi, this is Analytics, and welcome to another lesson. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts or questions in the comments. Let's get started. In this class, we're going to discuss in more detail about the differences in how Power Query treats null values versus white spaces versus blank strings. We have discussed about this topic in previous lessons, but I believe this is a very important topic for you to understand, so I'm giving it more attention, and that's why I'm recording a video specific on this topic, okay? And first off, we have to understand what is a string. And basically, a string is text. You will see that more experienced developers, more experienced professionals mostly refer to it as strings, but basically strings are the same as text. Only there are a few details that I want to discuss in this lesson. I'm going to use, in Power Query, I'm going to use a few measures. And at this point, you don't need to worry about what is a measure and how to create measures. That is not the scope of this class. I just wanted to focus on the explanation on the strings. You will learn how to create measures and everything about it. And as we move forward, please don't worry about that at this point if you're a beginner. So just pay attention to the explanation about the strings, okay? And I'm going to create a new text. I'm using a measure, just create a text, and I'm going to call it string1. String1, which means basically text1. The first thing you need to notice is that whenever we're writing text or writing strings, not only in Power Query, Power BI, in any programming languages, strings are always written between quotation marks. So anytime the program sees something written between quotation marks, it's going to be read as a string, which means it's going to be considered as text. Okay, so I'm going to write, I am learning Power Query, and let me bring this string to a visual. There you go, I am learning Power Query. And now I'm going to create a second string. I'm going to call it string2. And again, between quotation marks, if I want to create a string, it's going to be between quotation marks. And I'm going to give it a space, white space in the beginning. So the two strings, when I put them together, I won't have both of them stuck to each other with no white spaces in between. And Power BI. Okay, this is my second string, and I'm bringing it over to one of my visuals. Now I have two visuals. Each one has one string, a different string, or a different text. And now, well, actually, I cannot do any mathematical calculation with these two strings, okay, because they are basically text. So if I try to do it, for example, if I try to string 3, I'm going to call it string 3, and suppose I want to create a mathematical calculation with string 1 plus string 2, okay, and bring it to a visual, nothing's going to happen because it doesn't make sense. I'm trying to sum up two pieces of text. If I try to do any other thing like divide, it's not going to work either because it doesn't make sense. I can't make mathematical calculations. So there must be other kinds of things I can do with text. For example, I can concatenate both strings, which means I can put them together. I'm not summing them up or doing anything with math. I'm just putting them together. And the operator I use to do it is just the operator AND. And if I press OK, now my two strings were put together, and now they look like just one single string. Okay, so the message here is strings are text. From now on, I will refer to it as either a string or as text. It's the same thing. I just wanted you to be mindful that when you hear or read about strings anywhere, it's basically text. The second thing I want you to notice, and that is an important point for this lesson, is that I can have blank strings. Let me change string2, and string2, look, if I remove part of the string, I will press enter, and you will see that the parts that I removed here will be removed in the final result. So I pretty much deleted Power BI, and then Power BI should disappear right here. I will press enter, and it really disappeared. And again, I will remove everything in between the quotation marks and press enter. And of course, the second string, apparently the second string was removed because my final string looks the same as the first string, but actually it is not, because my final string if you click the formula, you'll see that my second string is still there. It's just not showing up in my result because, yeah, it's blank. The second string right now is blank. There's nothing inside the quotation marks. But only because there's nothing between the quotation marks, it doesn't mean it's no longer a string. Actually, it is a string, only it's an empty or blank string. But Power BI still sees it as, still understands there is a string in this measure. So even though this string is empty, it exists and it is read by Power Query or Power BI. So these were the two main points that I wanted you to understand. First, what is a string and how to create a string. And second, you may have empty strings in your data set. And let's see a practical example in Excel and Power Query. Okay, in Excel, I'm going to create a table and I will have 3 columns: no, white spaces, and blank strings. In the no column, well, let me create a structured Excel table. And over the first videos of this course, we discussed about structured tables. Please refer back to it. And I'm gonna make it a structured table so Excel will recognize exactly what is the size of my table. And in the first column, I'm not going to insert any data. I want these 4 cells to be totally blank. There's nothing. Data is totally absent in this column. But in the second column, white spaces, I'm gonna insert 1 white space in the first row, 2 in the second row, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the fourth row. So although you cannot see any characters or any digits in this column, you know there are white spaces in these cells. And white spaces are characters. They are read by Excel or Power Query or Power BI or any programming language. They are characters, and the program sees them as characters, which means although this column right here looks empty, just like this one, we know that this one is not empty because we have white spaces in these cells. And then blank strings, I'm going in Excel to insert a formula. I have to start with a quotation mark, and I'm going to start to open and close quotes, quotation marks, and between the quotation marks, I'm not writing anything, which means, as we just saw, which means it's a blank string. And again, let me just copy it down. I'm going to select the first row, and mark it down, and then press Ctrl D. Now the same thing that I had in the first cell was copied down to the others. So again, we see it as a blank column, but actually this column is not blank because we have empty strings, and empty strings are not seen by the user, but there is something in these cells because the computer will read blank strings as characters too. It's blank. You won't see it. Blank strings as something. There's nothing written between the quotation marks, but still it is read by the program as not blank, as there's something in there, even though this something is empty. It looks empty. Okay, let's bring it over to Power Query. That's our final goal since the beginning of this lesson. There you go. And now we're going to learn how to identify no values, white spaces, and blank strings. You can right off the bat see that there's a little text in each of the rows in the no column. And this text in italic, it doesn't mean there is any text in the cells. So this is just a marker to let you know that there's nothing in these cells. These cells are totally blank. There's no, you can see no, but no is not the text. That is kind of weird, right? It's not a text that exists in these cells. It's just a marker to let you know that these cells are totally blank. I mean, there is a total absence of data in these cells. So whenever a cell is totally absent of data, of any data, it's really blank, then you will see a no marker just letting you know that that cell is blank. So this is pretty much what is a no value is. It means no value at all. It means total absence of data. On the other hand, the cells that really look blank I mean, the one that doesn't look blank, there's no grid marked on them, all right? They don't look blank, but they actually are blank. But these other ones, they look blank, but they are not blank, because in this column, we have white spaces. We already know that. And in this column, we have blank strings, and they're not empty. And how can I actually see what is there in these cells? And that's really easy to do. You will just click the column you want to evaluate, and you can do it from the transform tab, but I'm going to use the add column tab, because then with using the add column tab, I'll create a new column, a new evaluation column. And all I have to do is just to count how many characters are in each column. All I have to do is extract the length of each row. And now you can see that this length is the length. This column will bring you the length of the cells in this column. So yes, we know that in the first cell, we have 1 white spaces because we just created this table, and 2 white spaces right here, 3 white spaces, and 4 white spaces. So we can see that this column is not blank because there are white spaces in each of the cells. And I can do the same with, let me remove the last step, and I'll do the same, but this time I'm going to select this last column, blank strings, and extract the length. And in this case, the length is 0 because, of course, it's a blank string. But even though it's a blank string, it's not seen by Power Query as a null value. And let's just see the effect of all this. Let me go back to Excel. I'm going to close out of Power Query. I won't save any change. But in this first row, I'm going to write something here, A, B, and C. And now let's go back to Power Query. Now I have A, B, and C, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the first column, hold Shift and select the last column, and in the Transform tab, I'm going to try to fill everything down. And look, it's only going to work in column A because this fill button, it's only going to work, it's only going to copy down or up the values through the null cells. Look, before we had 3 null cells, and now A was copied down through the null cells, but it didn't work with the second and third columns because actually these columns are not blank. These row 2, 3, and 4 are not blank in either of the columns. That's why it's not going to work. So how can I solve that? For column C, it's easy, right? It's easy. All I have to do is replace values, and it's an empty string. It's an empty string, so there's nothing actually inside there. There's nothing to find. There's no value to find in these cells. Although we know they are not blank, but there's no value to find. If I use 0, it doesn't make sense because there's no zero there. So that's nothing there. I only know it's not empty, but there's no character or digit that I can use to replace. So I'll just leave it blank, and I'll replace it with no lowercase. It has to be lowercase. Okay, now I replace the blank strings for no. If I use the fill button now, it's going to work okay. But for the white spaces, I have a different space count in each of the rows. So first off, what I have to do, I have to make sure that they will always have the same number of characters. So first, I'm going to extract everything that is before the delimiter, and my delimiter is going to be 1 white space. Okay, I have one cell with 2 white spaces and another with 3 white spaces and 4 white spaces, but as I'm extracting everything before the first white space, it doesn't matter how many white spaces I have after that one. I only care about taking anything before the first white spaces, which actually in that column is basically nothing because all we have are white spaces. And before the first white space, there's nothing. So they'll pretty much be empty strings. And now I will do the same. Before I move on, let me now extract the length of this column, and now you see that I have 0 in row 2, 3, and 4, which means now they are empty strings. And now to solve that, I'll do the same as I did with the blank string column. I'll just select the white spaces column and replace values. I'll replace nothing with no. Okay, and now I can fill it down. So This class was only to clarify any doubt and to give you all the important details about working with null values versus white spaces versus blank strings, just to make sure you have a consistent basis before we can move on and start working with more complex things. If you like this video, please don't forget to like it, subscribe, share your thoughts or questions in the comments, and see you in the next video.